All right, guys, this is my experience reading the Batman adaptation, a movie adaptation, and this is a continuation of my kind of overview of what I consider to be a really good kind of form of entertainment that's not really talked about in media, and that is tie-in, right? And adaptation, and I'm going to include a graph, but basically, like half of that is kind of a media, TV kind of filling in stuff, and the other, and essentially what it does is it kind of fills in overview. So the show and the movie, that's kind of the frame, but then they kind of fill it in, right, and they kind of use their imagination to the best of their ability. So that's kind of, so it's kind of like a best guess in a way, but what it does is it kind of allows you to get like a little bit of more information. And there are certain channels that, incorporate some of this material because it kind of fills in the gaps a little more, right? And helps. It's just kind of speculation, but it kind of fills in the gaps a little more. And, essentially what this book does, like, I haven't seen the movie, to be honest with you. But what the book kind of does is it takes, like, the Joker character who, like, they were kind of really the first to kind of give it basically type of origin story. Like, the character had been around for almost 50 years, right? And almost kind of 46, 50 years, and it hadn't really been given. They did something in the 50s where they kind of essentially, like, that's kind of the main, like, it's kind of generally based around that story, but they were the first to really give it, kind of flesh out a character, and they did a really good job, like, at least, so kind of what I read, like, it did a really good job of kind of like, filling in kind of the gaps of the story, the character, and essentially, like, it's not like a uplifting person, but essentially he's kind of like a bad guy, and they kind of fill in like some of the motivations, and essentially what he says is that, like, what he kind of argues is that, like, the Joker character kind of starts, before falling into the acid, and kind of begins like falling into the like when he's kind of walking up the stairs and Batman kind of chases him, he gets a little kind of basically scared, and he had like a card of decks, and up till that time, like, he had always kind of drawn like a Jack, so that was his name, but this time he draws a Joker, and it's not really talked about in the movie, like, they kind of just brush it by, like, but basically,
hello, thank you for watching.
That
this
kind
is
of
a video
seed,
about
and he's getting
another
chased,
kind
like,
of tie-in novel, which is really good. As
it kind of fills in some of the actions and explains
this is
some
kind of a
things,
really
so, like,
unexplored medium
essentially
that you can
what
get for
they're
free on the
saying is
internet.
The Joker character kind of started like
And
before
it's really
then.
nice and fun to read and
And
watch. This one's by
when he falls in
Lucasfilm.
acid,
It's called
like, that's just kind of
like
continuation.
Indiana
It's not
Jones
really that big of a deal.
Diary
So
of
it's
the
like,
Holy
he says,
Grail.
"Oh, the
And
Joker must
basically,
go
it was a
on." So, like,
tie-in for
they kind
the
of
kind of last of the trilogy.
are essentially
And essentially,
assuming that kind of
the movie, like
kind of when the character kind of like the character was kind of always there. Like, he kind of looks at the scenes, he's kind of assuming that the character actually started kind of during this chase, and it kind of like solidifies it, right? It's like it would have been just like a thought, but he kind of solidifies it by doing this really evil thing. Like, the Batman is kind of the bad guy in a way in this film, kind of like the bad guy, and then he it kind of like takes the perspective, like, it's not a really appealing thing, but they essentially take it from his perspective. And then I haven't seen the movie as much, but like, it kind of takes like the more, I think it's done to more of the women, of the story, and essentially like they kind of take her, like she's kind of in a way like more the good character, right? It's not like the Batman is kind of a background, at least in what I've read, kind of background character. Um, so yeah, it's kind of a dark story. It's not like a really, you have to be kind of careful. It's not like a super uplifting story, but you could tell like the author worked really hard and was passionate about like certain parts of it. And he does a really good job. Like what he's done is, he's done like a really good. It's really old. It's not like, hey, I'd say go rush to the shelves and read it. But he does a really good job of kind of understanding. And of his fleshing out. Trying to understand. Where these characters are coming from and where this guy is kind of coming from. And like I said, it's not the movie I'd probably rush to see, but or book I'd rush to get, but it does. You could tell his passion is there. And then like his ability to kind of like discuss kind of how this guy came to be, and really like understand kind of that, pinpointing that it's not really like the accident that made a person. It kind of starts kind of before then, and he kind of leads up to it. He kind of like, yeah, and then looking at kind of this character, this woman character, and he kind of like, takes this kind of line that she kind of says, and he kind of uses that really like to look back and say like, okay, like, she is coming from this point of view, right? And he kind of builds off that a lot. But like the Batman guy, like it's kind of seen like, it's not really like, from his perspective, it's kind of like a mystery. Like he's kind of like a side character in a way, at least to what I've seen. And he's kind of like not necessarily seen as a good guy, He's kind of seen like not really bad, but the character is kind of like not necessarily like, you kind of don't really know what he is. He's kind of not really like a good guy of the story. Like she's kind of more like the protagonist or kind of good person, and this other guy, like you kind of see it from his perspective, kind of like how this thing is kind of made, and like how this kind of creature and like monster is kind of made. So yeah, and then like it doesn't really, it kind of takes from like the police perspective as well, and essentially like in this world, like different than what like other shows and things where it's like, where later like they kind of took it in a direction where the like villains, like it was kind of Batman and the villains where they may focus, like essentially like in this world, like it's already kind of an older world, right? And they're already kind of corrupt, and essentially like the cops basically like, there's already, it's like, oh, it's just kind of one problem after another, and they just kind of seen as just kind of this like place that kind of is, you've been around for a really long time, just they're kind of older, right? It's kind of an older thing. It's not like a new, fresh new place, right? It's something that's been kind of corrupt, and it's just kind of worn people down, and they've been doing it, for a long time and a number of years. And I think that's kind of a different, like they kind of decided in later things to kind of, so basically it's kind of seen as a place that's kind of been, like this for a while. And so like basically, yeah, so basically they kind of take kind of the, like the Joker, like it's kind of more,